Hello, my name is Jay Greenstein, sometimes known as the grumpy old writing coach. Grumpy because writers make me so grumpy. But before I go on, there's a basic question that I know everyone is asking. Who are you and who are you to tell me how to write? And the answer to that is very simple. I'm Jay Greenstein, I'm a writer, and I make no pretensions to being a great writer. But I do have one talent that is very useful. I have screwed up everything that can be screwed up. I have made every mistake in writing that you can make. So, who better to say, for God's sakes, don't do that. I did it, and it didn't work. But more than that, I'm not trying to teach anyone how to write. That's not my job. That's my area of expertise. What I'm doing is pointing out the things that are obvious once you learn them, but before you hear them, before someone tells them to you, it never occurs to you. Like in a previous video, I talked about how we all believe that we learned how to write in school when actually we learned how to write nonfiction in school and learned nothing about fiction. So today I'm talking about the fact that you see it first. What I mean by that is, if you're reading a book and something is going on in that book, the villain makes a statement or a car comes hurtling towards our protagonist, who learns about that first? You do, because you read about it. And you don't find out what the protagonist does about it or in reaction to it until after you have reacted. And think about that. You react, you decide what you think our protagonist should be doing. But can you? You're not on the scene. Do you know everything that the protagonist knows? No. So there's a good chance that what you decide should be done, and that decision takes place as you read. You now go on and you disagree with what the protagonist says or does. Because that person knows things that you don't. So now you're in a position of disagreeing with the person who is supposed to be your avatar. You're supposed to be living the story as them, and you're in disagreement. So naturally, you're kicked out of the story. And right there and then is where, if that story, if those pages were sent to an editor of a publishing company in hopes of being published, that's where it would be rejected. So how do we get around that? We calibrate the reader's knowledge of the scene to that of the protagonist. We don't tell them what happens. We make them know the scene as that person does. We have to know their thought processes, how they view the scene, what they have to bring to bear, their goal, their short-term goal in this particular scene, and everything that they will use in their decision-making. As a matter of fact, we show their decision-making. And if we have been doing that up to the point where this event takes place, how are the readers going to react? Exactly the same as the protagonist, because they have the same goal, the same resources. And that has two very important and very necessary results. First is that we will react as the protagonist and feel as the protagonist did. Okay? And then, when the protagonist does that, we will always feel like, oh, they took our advice. And that draws us into the scene, as reporting will never do. Okay? Does that make sense? The trick is that we are not taught how to do any of that. We're taught how to report in school because that's what they want us to do, write reports and essays. And yes, they did ask us to write stories, but you do have to remember those teachers were not taught how to write fiction because that's not what they're going to be teaching. Fiction is writing fiction, or fiction writing, commercial fiction writing, what have you, is a profession. And those professional skills are learned over and above the general skills that were given in school. So, someone who does not know how to write fiction, has not published successfully anything they've written, even if they've tried, is going to grade your paper on whether or not you wrote fiction well. Do they have a clue of, for example, what an editor who is getting your work as a submission would react, how they would react? No, because they, like you when you were in school, know only nonfiction writing skills. And I know there would be people saying, yes, but I took a creative writing course. An undergraduate creative writing course, every one that I've seen so far, and I hope someone can show me something different, has been worse than useless. Because the standard methodology is you give them a book. That book has a chapter, or maybe two, but a chapter on poetry, fiction, journalism, all the various forms of writing. You read the part on fiction in a night or so, and then you write a story. Are you going to use what you've learned? Probably not, even if it was right. But the next day you bring that story in and you stand in front of the class and you read that story to the class. What's wrong with that? You're performing. So the class will hear the emotion in your voice as you read it to them, emotion that would not be there if they read it themselves. Okay? But then the class, who knows no more than you about writing fiction, will do a critique of it as if they had a clue of what a reader in the bookstore is looking for and how they react. Or better yet, the publisher that you send that submission to. So I have, as I said, I have found none so far. And when I owned my manuscript critiquing service, pretty much everything that I got was written as though it were a high school writing assignment. Not because they lacked talent, not because their writing wasn't good, but because they simply did not know how to write fiction. And they did not know that the reader sees it first and must know everything that they read as the protagonist does if they are to be the protagonist. I hope that makes sense. There's an awful lot to writing fiction that is not obvious until it's pointed out. And you won't see it when you read back your own writing because, as I've said before, you will perform it when you read your own work. You will have exactly the right emotion in it as you read. You will know, before you read the first word, you'll know where we are, who we are, and what's going on. So it'll make perfect sense. Unfortunately, the reader sees it first. Okay? I will make the same pitch I do in all of them. If you want to learn how the professionals view the act of writing, take a look at Dwight Swain's Techniques of the Selling Writer. I'll put a link to it below. It's out of copyright protection and it's free to read or download on that site. You will find it eye-opening. I certainly did. So, for now, you saw it first. Hang in there, keep writing, and I'll see you next time.